All right, let's talk about something that totally revolutionized web design, CSS Grid. Seriously, stick around because by the end of this, you're going to see website layouts in a completely new way.
You know the feeling, right? You've spent hours, maybe even days, fighting with CSS floats or trying to bend Flexbox into a two-dimensional shape it was never meant for. Getting things to line up perfectly in both rows and columns, it used to be a total nightmare. Well, that nightmare is exactly what CSS Grid was built to solve.
So what's the big difference between Flexbox and Grid? Well, it's actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Flexbox is fantastic for one-dimensional layouts, lining things up in a single row or a single column. But Grid was designed from the ground up for 2 dimensions. It lets you control rows and columns all at the same time.
And this right here is the perfect way to think about it. Flexbox is like a string of beads. You can slide them around on that one line, but that's about it. CSS Grid, on the other hand, is a chessboard. It gives you this entire board of squares, and you can place any piece exactly where you want it to go. This whole chessboard idea, that's the key to understanding everything.
Okay, so if Grid is a chessboard, how do we build it? Well, it all starts with understanding the 2 main players in any grid layout.
It really is this straightforward. First, you've got the grid container. That's the parent element. That's our chessboard. And then inside of that, you have the grid items. Those are the direct children, and they act as our chess pieces, just waiting to be placed. And check this out. The magic really begins with just one simple line of code. To turn any element you want into a grid container, you just tell it, display grid. That's it. Your game board is officially open for business. So we have a board, but a chessboard without any squares isn't going to be very useful, right? So next up, let's look at how we actually draw the lines to define our grid structure.
These 2 properties are going to be your best friends. Grid template columns, well, it does exactly what it says. It defines the number and the width of your columns, and grid template rows does the exact same thing, but for your rows. You are literally drawing the blueprint for your entire layout.
Now, this is where Grid starts to get really, really clever. Forget being locked into just pixels or percentages. The FR unit, that stands for fractional unit, is an absolute game changer. It represents a fraction of the available free space, which makes creating fluid, responsive layouts almost laughably easy. And the auto keyword is just as useful, telling a row or column to size itself perfectly to fit whatever content you put inside it.
And because nobody wants to type 1FR, 1FR, 1FR over and over again, Grid gives us this awesome repeat function. This one little line does the exact same work as typing it out 3 times, creating 3 perfectly equal columns. It's just so much cleaner, so much more efficient.
All right, our board is set up with all its rows and columns. Now it's time for the fun part, placing our content, our chess pieces, exactly where they belong.
But wait, before we place anything, here is a super important tip that trips up almost everyone when they're starting out. In CSS Grid, the grid lines, they start counting from 1, not 0 like in JavaScript. So the very first vertical line is 1, the next one is 2, and so on. Seriously, remembering this will save you so many headaches.
So to place an item, you just tell it which line to start on and which line to end on. As you can see here, properties like grid column start and grid column end let you do just that. For example, if you tell an item to start at column line 2 and end at column line 4, boom, it spans perfectly across those 2 columns. It gives you this amazing, precise control.
But let's be honest, counting lines can get a little tedious, especially in a big layout. Luckily, Grid has a much more intuitive way to do this, named areas. It's a simple 2-step process. First, on your main container, you use grid template areas to basically draw a little map of your layout using names you make up like header or sidebar. Then, you just assign each item to one of those named areas. It's like painting by numbers for your website. Okay, the pieces are on the board, but now we need to make everything look just right. Polished. Let's talk about the finishing touches. Spacing and alignment. Here is another one of my favorite features because it's so simple. Forget messing around with margins on every single item. All you have to do is use the gap property on the grid container itself. It creates perfect, consistent spacing between all your rows and columns. One line, and you're done. Perfect spacing. Now, alignment can be a little confusing, I'll admit, but this slide breaks it down perfectly.
The properties that have the word content in their name, like justify content, those move the entire grid system inside its container. The ones with items in the name, like justify items, they move the individual items inside their own little cells. Just think back to the chessboard. Content moves the whole board around, items moves the pieces on their squares.
So we've learned all the rules of the game. Now let's see where CSS Grid becomes an absolute monster. And that's in creating modern, responsive designs that look incredible on any device.
Okay, just take a second to look at this line of code. This is basically pure magic. What it's telling the browser is, hey, create as many columns as you can possibly fit. Make sure each one is at least 250 pixels wide, but if there's extra space, let them grow to fill it. This one single line creates a fully responsive grid, often without needing a single media query. It's just unbelievable.
And this chart here shows you exactly what that magic line of code does. On a big desktop screen, maybe you get 4 columns, you shrink the browser down to a tablet size, and it automatically, intelligently drops to 3. On a small phone, maybe it reflows to 2 columns or even 1. The layout just adapts itself. It's fluid, it's smart, it's exactly what we need.
So what's the bottom line here? CSS Grid is an absolutely essential tool for any modern web developer. It gives you this incredible power and control to build complex, two-dimensional, responsive layouts with code that is just so much simpler and more intuitive than anything we had before.
So, we've walked through the rules of the game, from setting up the board to some pretty advanced strategies. The power of the grid, it's now yours to command. The only question left is, what are you going to build with it?